The Recovery Couch is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors. A special thank you to Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Greg is more than just a real estate expert. He's a leader in our community who believes in helping people find their way home, both in life and in faith. If you're looking to buy or sell, connect with Greg and experience the integrity and service that he gives. We're also proudly sponsored by JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota, where community commitment and care come standard. JB and his team don't just sell cars, they support local voices that help inspire change. Together, these partners make it possible for us to keep sharing stories of redemption, resiliency, and recovery. The Recovery Couch is a true story media production, reminding you that every story matters and healing begins when we speak out loud. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Recovery Couch. I'm your host, Brandon Couch, and we're continuing a series called Learning Together, where we go through this book, which is a review preparation manual for drug and alcohol credentialing. And we're just going to learn about recovery and the stages of drug abuse and use. Last episode, we talked about the stages of addiction and how it starts with experimentation, eventually leads to dependence and the addictive stages. Just as a review of last episode, on average, it may take from 5 to 10 years following the first experimental use, which is the first stage of addiction, experimental use. It may take on average 5 to 10 years until a person progresses to the stage of dependency or addiction. That means that many who initiate drug use in their early teens will be addicted by their late teens or early 20s. Once the stage of dependency addiction is reached, the individual has acquired chronic relapsing disorder. Now, this is a common discussion in most recovery circles. I've heard a lot of people discuss how important it is to embrace relapse because of the severity of chronic relapsing disorder. And the grace that God gives us needs to be on display to the grace that we give those who are working a recovery program. And then I've also heard other people who don't have a whole lot of tolerance for relapse. I had a great conversation on this podcast with Ryan Canaday, executive director, lead pastor at Free Recovery Community in Denver, Colorado. And he says we never shoot the wounded. And his point behind that was a relapse tends to be a part of most people's story that are in recovery. And if they're wounded, we're not going to put them out of their misery, so to speak. We're going to get out our first aid kit and we're going to try to heal the wounds with love, patience, kindness, forgiveness. Unfortunately, in the professional world of recovery, most professionals believe that chronic relapse disorder can never be cured. Return to earlier stages of controlled use is no longer possible. I've also heard a lot of old timers in AA say that once they gave complete surrender to their higher power, that their will to want to use or drink or drug ever again was taken from them. But from a medical perspective, they believe that there's no cure. This is a disease that can never be cured. And then to close the review of last episode, I'm going to read this paragraph at the bottom. It says, knowledge of the mechanisms of substance abuse and addiction has not advanced enough to provide a cogent understanding of the reasons some people manage their use of alcohol or drugs while others progress to a problem stage of abuse or addiction. Some big words in there. What I think that means is there's been a lot of studies, a lot of therapy on why do some addicts go to a stage of IV injections of heavy narcotics, while others can manage their use of drugs or alcohol, or what some call a functioning alcoholic or a functioning drug addict. I think what this is telling us is there's no study that can completely identify why that's the case. They do say that it is likely that a combination of physiological, environmental, and psychological factors come together to exacerbate the problem of extreme drug use for some individuals. So they believe that it's likely a combination of physiological, environmental, and psychological factors. But there's no study that completely can prove that that's the case. So now that we've reviewed what we covered last episode, we're going to get into recovery. So we went through the stages of addiction, how long it takes from the experimental stage to get to the dependency addiction stage, how relapse tends to be a part of the recovery process, and how there's no real evidence that can back why are some people going to extreme levels of addiction, while others stay in a maintenance stage. So recovery, research indicates that while it is not a curable disorder, treatment for substance abuse does work. With treatment, substance-dependent persons enjoy healthy and productive lives. Instead of creating health risks, committing crimes, and requiring public support, recovering individuals make positive contributions to society through their work and their creativity. That's good news. That's encouraging. That should be encouraging for anybody who is currently in active addiction and a treatment center that's in the beginning of their recovery process, that's watching this, that sees me. There are avenues for you to be successful. You can do what I'm doing and create content to help other people. You can show up in rooms and have discussions with other people. You just feel better about yourself for pouring into other people and telling them about your journey and giving them hope. You can become a peer mentor at a recovery treatment center. The funny thing about that, it's not funny, but the interesting thing about that is we get so comfortable in these treatment centers. And some of us get comfortable in jail and prison. So why not get paid for it? Why not, get a license or get, graduate a veteran or a peer mentor program and be amongst your peers in these treatment centers, providing hope for the same type of people that we would sit in there and do classes with anyway. So there's avenues, there's options. Get your LCDC, go back to school like I did and study substance abuse counseling. Get a book like this, read it on the internet. There's options, and who knows? Pray about it. That might be your purpose in life. Recovery is the process of initiating and maintaining abstinence from alcohol or other drug use. It also involves making personal and interpersonal changes. So we can have as much knowledge about recovery and drug dependence and drug addiction as we want. We can just flood our brains with knowledge. Most of us who've sat in recovery treatment centers already know a lot. We just do. We know a lot of the effective counseling treatments. We know a lot of the diagnoses. We know a lot of the symptoms of the diagnoses. But the truth is, recovery is the process of initiating and maintaining abstinence while making personal and interpersonal changes. If we're not making those internal, personal, and interpersonal changes, the people that we hang out with, the people, places, and things, or we're not changing what's on the inside, then recovery is not going to work. But the good news is, if we do make those changes, if we start changing our behaviors, the way we think primarily, thinking more positively, thinking things will go my way, thinking that I'm not depressed, I'm worthy of a good life. If we start changing the way we think and changing our surroundings, then recovery is certainly possible. It will happen. You'll be a success story. There's also relapse prevention programming and supportive treatment. And recovery is a realizable goal. It can happen there's so many people that I know personally that are success stories in recovery. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that I know also that aren't. And I love them both the same. I don't categorize them into two different groups. I don't care if you're in day one of recovery. I don't care if you're in day zero of recovery. If you're making an effort to try to get better from a disease that's killed so many of my brothers and sisters, then trust me when I tell you I'm rooting for you. And if you're 45 years clean and sober, I'm rooting for you too. There's 5 critical components of effective treatment. Treatment is an effective tool in reducing drug abuse and rehabilitating those affected by it. The first critical component of effective treatment is an assessment. Now, as we go through these 5 critical tools in effective treatment, if you've been in a treatment or recovery center, then you'll probably notice this is kind of the intake process. This is how it goes. So the first one is assessment, where the counselors will use diagnostic instruments and processes to determine an individual's needs and problems. This is the stage I never really liked, asking too many questions, getting too personal. Now that I have a better understanding of the back end of recovery, I get it. But every time I sat in those assessment meetings, I always felt like, they were trying to get too personal. But it is an essential first step in determining the possible causes of addiction for the person, and it's the most appropriate treatment modality for his or her needs. So it's essential, even though those assessments seem to kind of get a little too close to or a little too personal. They're super relevant in creating your recovery program. The second critical component is a patient treatment matching. So this ensures that the individual receives the type of treatment corresponding with his or her personality, background, mental condition, and the extent and duration of substance abuse determined by the assessment. So again, the assessment is going to determine your substance abuse disorder, your substance of choice, any mental health issues. And then the second step, the second critical component is going to be matching your treatment plan to the diagnosis that was found in your assessment. So if it's a dual diagnosis, say, just to use some common terminology, you have anxiety, depression, combined with marijuana use disorder, substance abuse disorder, or substance use disorder, then they're going to match your treatment program to the specifics of somebody who suffers with anxiety, depression, and substance use disorder with the substance of choice being marijuana. The third critical component for effective treatment is comprehensive services. This includes a range of services needed in addition to specific alcohol or drug treatment. The needs of addicted persons are often very complex. I know mine were. My needs were very complex. I needed to be seen. I needed to be heard. I needed to discuss childhood trauma. I needed to discuss, behaviors that I had in active addiction. I needed to sort out the hurt and the pain that I felt. I needed to sort out the hurt and the pain that I caused. This is a complex, and this is why I think the recovery rates aren't what we would wish they would be, because this is just a complex disease. It's not as black and white as healing a flesh wound. We wish stitches could just be the answer for recovery, but they're not. There's also health problems. There's also financial and legal issues. You add that with psychological problems and many other problems, and you kind of get a difficult situation, which can cause a rift between the counselor and the patient, because the counselor may want to focus on, specifically talking about any mental health disorder, while the patient is thinking, I have court tomorrow and they might throw me back in jail. And these are just, difficult roadblocks that come along with recovery and this process. And I think those are important things for family members to understand. I think oftentimes a loved one, encourages their family member who's in addiction to go to a recovery treatment center. And the expectation is for the loved one in active addiction to come out healed. And when the truth is they go into that recovery treatment center and they open up a can of worms. Okay, why was I choosing to numb instead of deal with my reality? Now, okay, well, it's because I'm going all the way back to my childhood, to these wounds and this trauma that happened, and then continue to, become exacerbated through my teenage years into my early adult life until I'm a full-blown adult. And now we're opening up these whole cans of worms, and we're like, wait, I got to go back and deal with a lot. So I've said this before. I think, you know, the critical time for family support is right after a loved one leaves the recovery treatment center. I think you need to celebrate the sobriety piece of it while understanding there's still a lot of issues that are going to need to be worked out when they come home from their recovery treatment center. The fourth critical component of effective treatment is relapse prevention. And this is important because addiction is a chronic relapsing disease. And we have to understand that. Back to the Ryan Candidate quote, never shoot the wounded. That's when we're going to tend to need to love them the most. Even if you don't understand why anybody would ever use a drug, and you have a loved one who does, and they go get clean for 9 months and then they relapse on month 10, that is such a critical time for you to give grace. Even though you're not going to want to. You're going to want to put your face in your palm and say, what the hell are you doing? And I don't like being on this end of the microphone telling you what to do, but this, I just know from experience because I lived it. And now that I'm deep into my spiritual life, this is the type of love that God gives. And it's a healing type of love that we need to extend to the people who disappoint us with their drug use. Relapse prevention strategies are based on assessing an individual's triggers, those situations, events, people, places, thoughts, and activities that rekindle the need for drugs. Triggers rekindle the need for drugs. So we must develop strategies for coping with these triggers when they occur and when they're developed. So these are important conversations to have with people in recovery. What are your triggers? When that happens, what are you going to do? What are some tools that you have in your toolbox to deal with those triggers when those triggers become real again? Deep breathing, meditation, prayer. Those are things that work for me when I get triggered, specifically deep breathing and prayer. And sometimes I combine the two. And then the fifth critical component of effective treatment is accountability. Accountability of treatment program is crucial for determining the success of specific approaches and modalities. The need for the program, its integrity, and its results, including abstinence, social adjustment, and reduction of criminal behavior by those treated in program, must be evaluated. So back to what I was saying before about becoming a peer mentor. Why do we get so comfortable in these treatment centers? And I think it's because while we're in these treatment centers, we start to experience growth for the first time in a long time. We realize we can be sober. Sometimes it's easier to be sober in a group that is surrounded by people who have the same issues. And so they get it while society tends to kind of be like, well, why did you use drugs? And then we start to feel connected to these other people who can relate to us because we know they've been through a lot of the same traumas, that they've experienced a lot of the same darkness, that they've been stolen from, or they've had to steal, and they've had to do, all the same things just to survive. They've been in the survival mode. And there's a toughness that comes with that like you tend to respect. You're like, damn, like, I don't think people who haven't been there really get like, how difficult it is to just straight survive. And then we get back out into society. And I think that everything we learned in the programming and all that growth, we start to get hurt by the people who judge us and then we go back into survival because it's the only thing we know. So we need the programming because it provides us integrity and its results. And what I think that's telling us is once we graduate from a substance abuse treatment center, it's important to maintain the same type of integrity, the same type of programming in your life, recognizing triggers, practicing mindfulness and breathing, being around like-minded people, going to meetings, having community. Those are going to be important steps as we leave the treatment program. So treatment programs follow a model for comprehensive alcohol and other drug abuse treatment. So a model treatment program is going to include an assessment, we talked about, a same-day intake. They typically don't want to let somebody in active addiction leave their facility after the assessment. They typically want to get them in today. So assessment, same-day intake, and then they're going to document findings and treatment to enhance a clinical case supervision. So once they get their findings, they're going to provide those findings to a clinician, and the clinician will become the case supervisor. From there, they'll do preventative and primary medical care, which is provided on site. They'll do some testing for infectious diseases, and if they find any, they'll treat those infectious diseases while the patient is in treatment. They'll incorporate weekly random drug testing to ensure abstinence and compliance with the program. They'll do pharmacotherapeutic interventions. These are done by qualified medical practitioners as appropriate for those patients having mental health disorders, those addicted to heroin, HIV, seropositive individuals. They'll do group counseling interventions to address unique emotional, physical, and social problems. They'll do basic substance abuse counseling. They'll do practical life skills counseling. They'll do general health education, including nutrition, sex and family planning, and HIV/AIDS counseling. They'll do peer support groups. They'll do liaison services with legal aid, criminal justice authorities to help those who have criminal legal problems. They'll have social and athletic activities to retrain patients' perceptions of social interaction. They'll provide alternative housing for homeless patients or for those living situations that are not conducive to maintaining a healthy lifestyle. They'll do relapse prevention, and they'll do outcome evaluation, which is a comprehensive list of, what every person who is in serious throes of addiction need. These recovery treatment centers really have a litany of resources to help. So the book goes on to talk about the extent of drug use and how it's just prevalent in society. Talks about how there's no single measurement that provides a clear picture of alcohol and drug use and its complex interaction with individual and social problems. There's large-scale studies that use populations that are easily accessed, such as youth in high school or persons living at home with telephones. But there are no methods to look into the subgroups that are known to have high rates of substance abuse, such as prisons, homeless persons, and high school dropouts. It makes those types of individuals reluctant to disclose any of their information. So with that being said, addiction numbers are hard to survey. The numbers are staggering, even though they're probably not accurate. Among the 133.1 million current alcohol users age 12 or older, 60 million were past month binge drinkers. Among people aged 12 years old or older, 3.3% misused opioids in the past year. We covered that statistic yesterday. 46.3 million people aged 12 years old or older had a substance use disorder in the past year. About 3 in 5 adolescents aged 12 to 17 used products containing nicotine in the past month. That's 60%. And mental illness among adults, 0.5% of adults aged 18 years old or older had serious mental illness, SMI, serious mental illness. That's 14.1 million people. And again, this is a national survey on drug use and health, NSDUH. It's an annual survey of the civilian, non-institutionalized population of the United States aged 12 years old or older. Among adolescents aged 12 to 17, 20% in the past year have had major depressive episode, MDE. Among adolescents aged 12 to 17 in 2021, 12.7% or 3.3 million people had serious thoughts of suicide. In 2021, 18.8% of adults aged 18 years old or older received any of the following mental health services: inpatient or outpatient mental health services, prescription medication for a mental health issue, or virtual services, telehealth services, which means mental health is common, it's real. Don't feel alone. Don't isolate with it. Talk about it. I don't want to say everyone. I don't like using terms like that, but most people, when you break mental health down to anxiety, depression being some of the surface level stuff, those are mental health disorders. And I think everybody can admit that they've suffered with a little bit of anxiety or depression at some point. Talk about it. Reach out. You're not alone. I'll tell you that right now. Mental health and substance abuse conditions together, that's a dual diagnosis. So if you've been curious, what is a dual diagnosis? It's in the substance abuse field. It is when you combine substance use disorder with a mental health diagnosis. And in most cases, people in active addiction or in recovery are suffering from a dual diagnosis. I've been diagnosed with a dual diagnosis. Nearly half of young adults aged 18 to 25 had either a substance use disorder or AMI in the past year. Let's go back and see what that's any mental illness. So 45.8% of young adults aged 18 to 25 have had either a substance use disorder or any mental illness in the past year. Perceived recovery among the 29 million adults aged 18 years old or older who perceived that they ever had a substance use problem or substance abuse problem, 72.2% considered themselves to be in recovery or to have recovered from their drug or alcohol use problem. The response to substance abuse. The medical view of addiction understands that addicted persons have a treatable disease, much like other diseases such as diabetes. Addiction is a chronic disorder that is prone to relapse. So even though it can't be cured, it is treatable, even after significant periods of recovery. Thus, the individual needs treatment that is appropriate for his or her particular needs and problems based on an assessment of the cause and the course of the disease. Treatment approaches have evolved in two basic categories. One, pharmacological modalities, which affect physiological processes such as detox and medical-assisted therapy. Medical-assisted therapy being methadone, maintenance, Suboxone. There's even, I know, some places that are doing marijuana as medical assisted therapy. So they can do a maintenance where, the person in addiction isn't engaging in criminal behaviors to obtain drugs. They can live a normal life, and there's still a medical assistance that is prescribed and given out by a doctor. Now, you can have your own opinion on that. I think that, if it's saving lives, then it can't be terrible. We're asking people in recovery to make progress, to not be perfect. And I would encourage everyone to kind of adopt that mindset and that approach. You may not like Suboxone, you may not like methadone, you may not like marijuana, but if somebody's life is improving and they're still here, then I would say maybe change your way of thinking to, hey, they're improving and they're still here. Doesn't mean you can't pray for them to one day be rid of any medicines, but if you're going to encourage them to be positive and have a positive mindset, then, be the leader. The conclusion: substance addiction is a chronic, progressive, relapsing disorder affecting all citizens in one way or another. Let me say that again. Substance addiction is a chronic, progressive, relapsing disorder affecting all citizens in one way or another. If not directly involved, many have family members with alcohol or other drug-related problems. Highways and places of employment are sometimes unsafe because of the effects of alcohol and drugs on motorists and coworkers. And it's a devastating disease to individuals, to the families, and to the communities. And to that point, now it does devastate the individual in it. It devastates the family in it. It devastates the community in it. And the individual who was in the addiction doesn't need to put themselves on a pedestal as I was hurt more than anybody. And the family doesn't need to put themselves on a pedestal of you hurt me more than you'll ever know. That shit needs to stop, dude. Period. I'm going to be the one that says it. That shit needs to stop, dude. Everybody was hurt. Everybody needs to heal. And that healing is going to be through love and forgiveness and on all areas. So and sometimes I watch these interventions and it's like a whole family sitting there being like, you hurt me so bad and you'll never understand. And that, that's the case too. But man, to be honest, since I was in active addiction, I've always thought, man, that person probably has a lot of shit that they want to say too. Everybody's hurt there, including the person that's getting the intervention. Everybody's hurt. I don't like that. I don't know. I don't want to go on a tangent, but it affects everybody. I've grown to know and love a lot of people who are in recovery and who have, been in active addiction, and they're good people. They're good people. Some of the best people I know, to be honest with you. Hearts of gold. I mean, poor decisions. Yeah, we've made them, but I've seen drug addicts in recovery share with each other more than in any other social setting. And that's the truth. I mean, I don't care that it's cigarettes or I don't like, they share with each other. They've been humbled to the point of appreciate little things, a conversation, and they ain't asking for much. A little food in the tummy, simple people, man, with big hearts. While prevention efforts are successful in lowering rates of substance abuse among some segments of the population, addiction is a pervasive problem among others. However, treatment is a cost-effective strategy for intervening to stop the cycle of destruction and despair. Treatment programs providing comprehensive services and attending to the continuing treatment needs of the individual are most beneficial. That's the conclusion. So today we talked about recovery. What does it look like? Okay. The first episode, we talked about stages of addiction. The person experimented, then they started to use it to cope. Then they became dependent. Then they became addicted. Now that this person has become addicted, they need recovery. So today we dove into the topic of what does recovery look like? Okay. They're going to first get an assessment. These assessments are going to provide diagnoses, and the diagnoses are going to be based off of the way that the patient responds to the assessment. So honesty is crucial there. Then they're going to be taken into the treatment facility. They're going to be given a case supervisor. They're going to be tested. Their health is going to be monitored. They're going to be drug tested. There's going to be, if necessary, pharmacotherapeutic interventions. There's going to be group counseling interventions, basic substance abuse counseling. They're going to practice life skills. They're going to become active physically. They're going to have peer support. They're going to have groups. They're going to have help with their legal issues. They're going to be provided resources to overcome homelessness. And then they're going to practice relapse prevention. That's what we covered today. Among a litany of statistical surveys on how prevalent substance use and mental health disorders are in our society. So for anybody watching, I do want to remind you, I suffered 10 years in active drug addiction. I wrote a book about it. It's called Step 4, A Journey Through Addiction. And read it. It'll tell you that if these messages resonate with you in any way, because you were in active addiction, you are in active addiction, you're in recovery, or you love somebody in recovery, or you minister to somebody in recovery, this book's for you, because at one point in time, I seemingly had it all together, and drugs took everything away, everything. My family, my money, my job, my freedom. And I started my rebuild sitting in prison, and I write all about it. I think you will enjoy the read. I've got a lot of great feedback. You can order it through my Square account. You can order it on Amazon or any book retailer, but it's my testimony and what God's done. It's really, honestly, it's a comeback story. It's a story about resilience and overcoming, and how, like I talked about earlier in this episode, anything's possible. You just can't give up. The major ingredients, God's number one ingredient, higher power. You got to have spirituality. That's not just my opinion. Dr. Bill made a whole entire 12-step process on it. You can't do it without a higher power, without believing in something greater than yourself. And then the number 2 ingredient is your willingness. You just can't give up, bro. I mean, you got to be tough mentally in that aspect of like, they may not believe in me, but I don't care if they do or they don't. Because I'm not giving up on my dream. I'm not giving up on my hopes. I'm not giving up. And if you have those things in place, bruh, you're going to make it. Trust me when I tell you. I love y'all. That's from the heart. I'm super thankful that you guys tuned in. Stay tuned. Next episode, we're going to cover the topic of different drugs of abuse. And we'll talk about all the different types of drugs that people are abusing. A lot of them, honestly, are prescription drugs, guys. And most of the drug addicts that are out on the streets, that's where they started. Let's be honest about that. Let's clear the air on that. Not because we're trying to make excuses for anybody out there using drugs, but because there's a greater problem. It's not, there's a bigger problem than just people are out here panhandling to go get dope. The first drug dealer that most people went to was writing on a prescription pad. So I love doctors. That's not dissing doctors at all. It's just the truth. So I want to thank you again for tuning in. Before we go, man, I read some good stuff. I've been reading scripture a lot lately, and my son gave me this Bible. It's the Maxwell Leadership Bible. In it, he wrote, "I love you, Dad," and I love that. But I started reading Acts today. I just finished reading the Bible in a year on my Bible app, and today was my first day without that. So I decided to open my actual Bible. And John Maxwell does a fantastic job of drawing parallels of leadership with Scripture. And as I was reading Maxwell's summary of the book of Acts, and it spoke to me. And so I'm going to read it to you. Acts is a book of action. Notice it is called Acts, not Reacts. It is about the initiative and action of the Holy Spirit in the lives of disciples who formerly were cowardly, unsure, and ignorant. That's all of us before the Holy Spirit comes in. Us men who learned to follow Jesus for 3 years, we're now learning to lead. We get to learn to lead. In the sequel to his gospel, Luke reports that those early disciples mobilized the church so effectively that they reached entire cities. You can read that in Acts chapter 9, verse 35. And they saturated whole countries with the gospel. This is how fast the news of Jesus was spreading. The action described in this book shows God empowering men and women who decide to stand for God with the Holy Spirit. So this whole book of Acts is a testament of God empowering men and women who stood for his truth. They determined to be influencers. I thought, what an interesting word, influencers. I mean, that's what this page is all about. You're watching this right now. I'm an influencer. You're an influencer. How are we influenced? God's going to empower us to influence if we follow him. Let's influence the right way. Despite their lack of human qualifications, hey, that's me, bro. Despite my lack of human qualifications, they began to penetrate their society. God accomplished this primarily through ordinary people with little in the way of education, political clout, or prestige. Is that you? Because that's definitely me.